My guest today is Lindsey Laughlin. Lindsey is the Vice President and Marketing Strategist at Gravity Group Company. She is a marketing professional with a passion for helping brands reach their goals through honest, creative marketing. She began her career executing the media strategy for the direct-to-consumer division of an international software company and later found her way to the Gravity Group. Once she got there, she immediately began helping clients with marketing strategy, campaign execution, and media placement. And over the years, her role has evolved to include business operations and brand experience. So today, Lindsey and I are going to dive into the differences between branding and marketing, why the two must align together, what happens if they don't, and what they can do to resolve those issues. And before we get into all of that, she's also going to talk a little bit about her love for travel, including her experiences climbing glaciers in Iceland, zip lining through the Smoky Mountains, and how she is currently planning an expedition trip to Antarctica. Let's jump right in. Okay, Lindsey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
The founder of your company, Gravity Group, he's been on my podcast, Steve Gilman. So it's interesting to get like a different perspective within the company, So, I want to ask you first, before we get into the gist of the questions today. You love to travel. I am not a traveler. So this always intrigues me when I meet somebody like yourself who's, really into it. You climb glaciers in Iceland, zip line through Smoky Mountains. Were you ever scared doing these things?
I think the excitement of it maybe pushes aside any fear. To be honest, when I was hiking the glacier in Iceland, I was with friends and I didn't even realize that there could be a danger aspect to it until we got back to our hotel afterwards. And we heard that there were some other tourists that were there kind of right after we were. And someone from that group actually fell down into a crevasse.
Wow.
And they were fine. It took a few hours to get them out. But I think that's the point that it hit me like, oh yeah, that was maybe a little bit dangerous, but wow. We had tour guides and I felt like we did it safely. So it was a lot of fun.
Wow. Yeah. That's just something that I will probably never do. And I'm okay with that. But now you're planning to go to Antarctica. Is this actually a plan? Have you planned it out or you're just still not thinking about it phase?
In the planning stages, I have a trip planned for this winter to visit the European Christmas markets. And then a friend that I actually went to Iceland with, she and we kind of penciled it in for 2025 to go to Antarctica. So starting to do some research and watch all of the videos, but I'm really excited for that.
Wow. TikTok has a lot of people, they video going through the Drake Passage, I guess, is the crazy. Like, it's just crazy. Yeah. Again, yes. Not for me. So congratulations on doing all that traveling. So let's just jump into today's topic, which really is about branding, marketing, how they work together, how they don't work together. And I want to get your take on a lot of these things. Can you first start with a little bit of background about how Gravity Group differentiates itself from in the marketplace as such a competitive field?
Like a lot of agencies, we're pretty full service. So we have, in-house design, in-house production, video production, things like that. But I think we're a lot different than other agencies is Steve really brings a strong brand perspective to everything we do. And I bring the marketing perspective. So we've worked with some companies, early in a relationship, and they were used to doing some pretty extreme marketing things that were really creative. But didn't necessarily help their brand. So it didn't grow brand awareness or brand preference. And in some cases, some of the things they were doing actually probably hurt it a little bit. Mm-hmm. And there are other companies and kind of on the flip side where they put a lot of effort into building their brand, but then they don't really pay attention to product marketing or how they could bring in some performance marketing to drive sales as well. So we like to look at branded marketing as kind of guide rails or guardrails for everything we do. So as we're making decisions and we're planning with clients and doing strategy and working on campaigns, we really are bringing both the brand and a marketing perspective to it to make sure that at the same time that we're driving sales or trying to be creative with marketing, we're also working to build their brand and grow brand awareness and brand preference and things like that.
Yeah. And you would think those two just go hand in hand naturally, like it's, common sense. But can you also You see on LinkedIn a lot of people saying what branding is and what branding isn't. Can you define how you would define brand?
I think a lot of people think that brand is something that is just created. I've seen workshops, geared towards small businesses, or in some cases, even local municipalities and tourism offices, where there's a consultant that says, we're going to come in and we're going to do a 3-day intensive and we will come up with what your brand is. And I think that that's kind of a misperception, and they're misspeaking a little bit, because really a brand is what your audience thinks of you. It's their perception of you. It's the story that they've told themselves based on, things like the way your logo might look, the copy that they see in marketing or messaging, the experience they have when they call you or they walk into your store. It's a mix of all of those things, and it's ever changing. So it's not something that I can say my brand is X, Y, and Z, and everybody automatically agrees and is like, okay, I know exactly, what Lindsey's brand is. It's really ever changing, and it's created in the minds of the people that we serve.
And aside from that is that you don't want to let other people decide what your brand is, right? Like that sounds like what you're saying is you just put it out there, and whatever people say, it's sort of like,
yeah, no, it's a lot of work. There's a lot that the brand has to do, and a lot of thought and strategy goes into it to influence what people, what their perception is of you. If you think of all of the touch point that you have with the companies and the brands that, you buy from or don't, right, all of that influences, what you think of that brand, right? So as the brand, you need to be thoughtful about each of those elements. I think where what I'm saying kind of differs maybe from what some of those consultants that I've seen in the past say, where you can just create a brand. You can create branding, and you can work to build your brand, but really what your brand truly is, lives with your audience.
Yeah. And if you get that wrong, or if you deviate, you hear all the time in the news about a brand that made a misstep, created a new flavor and put it out in the market and just bombed. It just didn't fit in with their branding, and the customers knew it. I know myself, I'm a huge makeup addict, I guess is the word I would use, but I will not, I look for makeup brands that are cruelty free, that don't test on animals. That's something that's relatively new for me. And fortunately, a lot of businesses and a lot of cosmetic companies now are going that route. But if I see somebody who owns or president of a makeup company that is doing or saying things I don't like, I won't buy that product. To me, that represents their brand. And if I don't agree with it, or if it's really off-putting, and it's happened enough times, I just won't. It's that important, I think, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's where, we've had clients come to us in the past, and I think people in marketing get this a lot. I think people PR get this a lot, where there is a brand problem that people are trying to solve with marketing or PR. And you have to address the underlying problem that's happening. Is it, to your point, that people representing the company or the company itself is supporting things that don't align with consumer values? Is it that those touch points that you have with a brand, whether it's the people working, frontline in retail staff or customer service, that the experience people are having is just poor? Whatever that is, those problems need to be addressed. We like to say that marketing, at least the work that we do, we like to shine a light on the things that are going really well for the brand and tell that story, tell your true, honest, authentic story. We can't, take something that's bad and just turn it into gold and make it look great. Right. Because the moment people actually experience the brand and that falls through, that just hurts you even more.
Yeah, especially with social market. It's just the social networks being what they are. It was interesting because the other day I was on Reddit. I don't post on Reddit, but I kind of lurk, and it's great for finding what people are really saying about your brand. And it was very interesting because do you have pets? Like there's a brand called Chewy. Mm-hmm. So Chewy is, they provide pet supplies and food and everything. And I use them. Somebody on Reddit said, my dog passed away and Chewy sent me this card. It was like, I don't know if it was handwritten, but they posted it on Reddit and it was beautiful. And they had these other things to say about it. Like, they said, why don't you, we're not going to charge you for this, or whatever it was. They gave them a gift or something. And people started piling on about how great Chewy was and all these different examples. And that, I've used Chewy for years, but that really it boosted them in my mind. Like, this is a company that really cares. And I never knew that. So you have people talking about things like that.
And I think Chewy's a great example because I've had similar experiences. I've used them for years. I had 2 dogs. I have 1 dog now. And I'd heard those stories. I used to get for my dogs handwritten birthday cards, holiday cards, all of the things. Was a huge ambassador. In fact, Steve and I even did a break room episode of our podcast where we were talking about brands we liked, and I talked about Chewy because I love them so much. And then I started having the opposite experiences with them, where when my dog died and I let them know because I needed help updating my account, they were like, okay, that's taken care of. Do you need anything else? And so seeing other people having those great experiences and not experiencing it myself actually made me start to not like the brand as much.
Yeah.
So I think consistency is also really important. I think that's, I'm probably an exception to their customer service, that people normally get with them. But I don't get the cards, and my dog doesn't get the cards from them anymore. I had that experience. And so now for me, just kind of whenever I see that, I'm like, oh, well, I wonder what it is about me. I've been a customer for years. I don't feel valued anymore.
Yeah.
I see what they're doing for others, but it's not consistent. So I think they're a great example because I think they're an amazing company, but consistency is just really important. And if you start to give people a really great brand experience and then something changes and you can't keep up or do it, across the board, I think that's also something that people notice.
That's such an important point. And do you think that's also why, like on LinkedIn, there are companies that don't want all of their people on LinkedIn? Because what if they're not in alignment? I mean, this is why you have to have meetings within companies. Like, how are we going to, represent, how are we going to speak about what we do, kind of thing. As a single entrepreneur, I mean, I don't run into that. I do what I want. I can ruin my own brand if I want to. But that's so interesting about Chewy, because when I was reading this thing in Reddit and I was thinking back about what have they done? They've sent me cards, but nothing ever really struck me like that. But then people were saying, I got a painting of my dog and they do this rent. I'm like, really? But yeah, a single move, like you have a couple of people. I'm thinking, like when you were talking about like somebody in customer service, you go to like a dentist or a doctor's office, and that front desk person is crucial to how people are going to feel about. And so many times you hear complaints like on, Yelp reviews that the people in the office were awful. If you're going to get your teeth fixed or something, you're probably freaked out to begin with. And then you have to deal with somebody who's cranky, So, I mean, it doesn't take a lot to ruin a brand. I mean, would you agree with that?
I absolutely do. And I think that's why empathy is so important, because whether it's, customer service and kind of that in-person or on the phone experience that people have with your brand, all the way through to the copy on your website, the marketing messages you're putting out, if you're really thinking about your audience and your goal is to help them in some way, whether it's to understand how to use a product or to help them navigate, scheduling for appointments to get your teeth cleaned or whatever the case might be. But if your goal is truly to serve them and you're putting yourself in their shoes and thinking, from marketing, from a targeting perspective, people talk a lot about, what's the demographic of the people we're trying to reach? What age are they and where do they live? But for everything from targeting digital placements to how you treat people when they walk in the door, if you're really putting yourself into how is this person feeling right now? Right. Are they scared? Are they confused? Are they overwhelmed by the number of choices to make? They have money, they know they need this product, but there's a lot of choices in the market. Which one do they go with? I think if we're thinking about our audience and really trying to put ourselves in their shoes and empathize with them, it really just makes their brand experience better, and we get better results and can actually build relationships with our customers.
Yeah. And it seems like the demographic of, the household income has little to do often with, what someone's going to put money out for. Like I used to do personal training and I charged a lot for it. And I had one client, she was a waitress, and she would pay me in singles from her tips. Like she valued what I did. So I'd get to her, she'd like pay me, she'd dump all these singles on the table. And this was like, how, because she valued what I did. And then I had other people who were CEOs of companies that, had a lot of disposable income, and they would, or, not argue, but debate with me over my rates and stuff. So it doesn't, they have to value what you do and understand it. And you mentioned at the beginning of our conversation about brand and marketing and how sometimes they don't work together. How can they work together? And what are like the pitfalls of why that doesn't happen more often?
I'll give you an example. There was a company that I had seen at one point that they were running a special offer for one of the products that they had. And as part of their offer, you would get kind of like a prize or, you know, an item with purchase. And then they put their logo, you know, all over those items and everything. But the items were things that wouldn't align well with their brand. So, this is just an example. This wasn't actually what it was, but it would almost be being like if you or I wanted to put our logo on little garbage cans to give to people. It was kind of at that level, right? And so that's sure, it's something people maybe would use every day, but do you really want your logo on a garbage can if you're not like waste management company?
Right.
Probably not. So it just wasn't, it didn't help build the brand in any way. It did nothing for brand recognition. It kind of maybe made people laugh a little bit at the brand or kind of cheapened it a little bit. So just keeping an eye on, you know, as you're thinking about your audience and your marketing efforts, what messages can we put out that will help to promote this product or this service that we're offering? And in what ways can we also make sure we're building the brand? So of course, brand standards, you know, making sure the logo's in there, it's used appropriately, our brand tone, our voice, all of that is consistent, you know, with our brand standards, our brand guide, but also just thinking about where you're placing, what your message is. Are there iterations of your message? So maybe there's one version that speaks to people more in an awareness or consideration phase that is a little bit more brand building. And then maybe there's a little bit stronger message with an offer or stronger call to action that's for people who are or have a higher purchase intent. And you might target those differently. So it's really just looking for opportunities to connect with different people in your audience who might have different awareness levels of your brand and who you are.
Yeah. And as you were talking, I'm thinking too that's such a great opportunity to really think about, like, instead of, all right, we're just going to make a t-shirt with our logo or a hat. I mean, everyone does that, but there's so much more you can do with that. You know, there's, like you said, I mean, if it was a waste management company to put their name on maybe like a little desktop garbage can, that would be cute. And it is in alignment with them. But I think that's such a great area where people, you know, marketers and brands can get together and just come up with what would represent us that would be unique, that people would remember us and maybe make them laugh a little bit, you know, that it wouldn't take that much, but I think people maybe get lazy. It's like, we'll just put it on a t-shirt, put it on a, you know.
Well, and even thinking of product packaging and the opportunities within product packaging, if you think about products like Dove chocolates or Tillamook cheese, you know, Dove on the inside of the wrapper, there's a little nice message for you. And Tillamook cheese, if you flip over your bag of cheese on the very bottom, there's a little message that people will only see if they flip that bag over and, you know, and look at it.
Funny.
But those unique little messages and opportunities, I think, kind of take your brand to a next level. It's a different way to connect with your audience and kind of make them smile or make them feel good. Yeah. And it's super easy. It really, to your point, doesn't cost anything different. But it's just that extra special little touch point for your audience that I think shows you care and can say a lot about your brand if you were recognizing those opportunities and taking advantage of them.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, yeah, it's just easy to, it's as easy to do as it is to not do, you know, like let's just spend a few minutes and come up with something here, you know, would be great. I don't know what I'd do as a copywriter. I mean, you know, there's so many pens that people have that it's like, I think that's kind of such old school thing, but there's opportunities in every type of niche, right?
You could give out erasers because people, you know, if they get tired of having to erase and start over, they could just contact you and then work with you as a copywriter.
There you go. I haven't had an eraser since like grade school. See, that would bring a smile. Yeah, just remember getting all those erasers when you were a kid. That's funny. A lot of people wouldn't even know what they were. What am I supposed to do with this thing? So can you talk a little bit about how storytelling comes into play? Because I know that's a big part of the Gravity brand, is it not? Because that's Steve has his whole podcast is all about storytelling.
It is. So one of the things that if you talk to Steve, you will hear him say is that people buy emotionally and then defend their purchase logically.
Yeah.
And if you think about the things that you buy, you've likely bought it because whether it was your gut, like you were just drawn to it. And then you think, oh yeah, well, if I buy this, sure, it fits within my budget, or it's going to make me healthier or happier or whatever. You try to rationalize that. And I think stories are just such a great way to connect with people, make them feel, you know, I'm more likely to buy a product that I feel like cares or aligns with my values, or that I think is just going to work wonders for, whatever the case might be. I, like you, I love makeup and skincare products. So packaging plays a role in that. The messaging or ads I see play a role in that. What people are saying. And so storytelling is just such a great way to connect with people, to make them feel something. No one wants to read just a list of product features and feel like they're being sold to.
Right.
But a story is something that you remember, and it means something to you. And they're just so powerful.
Especially if you're selling something that really, where it sets people up for some kind of a transformation. Like, I'm thinking the most obvious one is the fitness world. People who have gone through, losing a lot of weight, now they're helping other people. They're going to relate to that person better than someone who's always been an athlete, and who's never had a weight problem. It's like, how can you relate to me? I mean, not everyone thinks that way, but a lot of times I think that it's important to know that this person's been through it. I see that a lot with like coaches, if you're coaching like trauma, victims, because you've been through one yourself. I almost think it's like a requirement, because how do you know emotionally how people feel, unless you've been there?
Yeah. Testimonials are a great way, a great example of storytelling. And I think even, as marketers, if we're thinking about what story we can tell to people to get them to purchase in a authentic way, like not making something up, to try to swindle them. But even if you're selling something like computer software, thinking about the people who would use and benefit from that software, what problems are they facing if they don't use it? How are we helping to solve those problems? We want them to remain the hero of the story because they're the hero of their story. But how can our product come along? How can we kind of be like the guide that leads them to a solution that helps them? And then the answer, is our product or service.
Yeah, I had a client who was sold, it's a SaaS product that worked, and it was the agricultural field was their target audience. And I was on the phone with one of their customers, and he said, what I love about this app is that I can use it anywhere, and offline or online, which that was a big selling point for them. And then he said, there's no Wi-Fi in the hen house. And that quote made it to their copy. And even the CEO was like, this is great. And just those little things that people bring up that make you, it kind of puts you there, and it was something that you wouldn't think about. Like if you're just sitting in front of your computer trying to come up with something, you really need to talk to people, find out, how they're feeling about, the problems. And like one of my favorite questions is to ask somebody like, so walk me through your day, like, in targeting like the challenges that they have. Like, when does this come up? And what would it look like if you could resolve it? And what if you don't resolve it? And so you get into them really talking about how they're feeling about it. And that's gold, for copy and messaging.
Knowing your audience is so important, and actually observing them and talking with them. I'm taking a course right now on design thinking. And one of the things that we talked about kind of this past week was how important it is to go out and talk to people, and also how important it is to observe them kind of in their natural habitat, because there are things that they might not even think to tell you or recognize that they do, or that's a problem. So I think you're absolutely right. Like, go talk to as many people as you can, watch them trying to, to do their work and see what happens. And so often you'll get those really good sound bites that help with copy.
And that's also the argument for having like a Zoom call versus having somebody fill out a form. Because when you fill out a form and you answer questions that way, like I used to do a lot of content writing for magazines, and the advantage of having somebody fill out questions on a form is that you had backup. Because I had one instance where someone denied saying something, and I had it on, the email, and I sent it to my editor. It was something he didn't want published. I'm like, well, he said it. And they were like, okay, so I backed myself up. I mean, but now you can even record, but it's just a whole different thing when people have time to think about what they want to say, and then they go back and they're going to edit themselves. And, versus like, okay, let's just talk, and you can see how they're reacting to things, what their body language is. And that's where it takes also emotional intelligence to really know people. It's super important.
It does. A lot of the shoots that we do, whether it's a testimonial shoot or we're shooting a video and interviewing people, and so really anything that's not scripted, we've had some people try to script what they wanted to say on camera. And it is never as good as the people that come into it and just let us ask them questions.
Yeah.
We believe in a very conversational interview style. It's not, an interrogation or anything like that, but just kind of letting people talk and guiding them a little bit. And we always get such wonderful answers. They're all so much more well-spoken than I think they even realize.
Yeah.
But there's moments that people try to script things too much. You just lose a little something. I love just being able to talk to people and seeing where the conversation goes.
Yeah. Especially if people are using AI. Like I had, I come up with, we have questions that I want to make sure you and I cover in this interview, but I went to AI and say, hey, I'm speaking to, and I just kind of describe what our conversation would be about. And it came up with some good questions, but they're worded in a way I would never word them. And it's like, I'm not going to ask this, but like I get ideas, that way. And I think people if you rely too much on AI and scripted conversations, it's just going to sound like it. It's going to be obvious, right? And one last question. So what is the cost of being too focused on one or the other, marketing and branding?
If you're too focused just on branding, what we see a lot is that the marketing directors or VPs that we work with oftentimes will get a push from leadership to hit certain goals. And sometimes there's a basis for those goals. And sometimes it's just, well, it was this last year, we want to increase it, by X amount or whatever. And so they're constantly chasing a certain KPI.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes that can be at the expense of actually building your brand. A lot of times if you're relying on such highly tracked marketing, then it tends to go towards digital media because it's a lot more trackable than other types. And you just see churn. You see doing, maybe wildly different things that aren't really on brand, but you're just trying to get that next click to kind of wrap your KPIs. And that can work in a short term. I think, a few years ago, we saw kind of the pendulum between brand and marketing kind of swing more towards marketing and especially digital and performance marketing. And we're starting to see that come back a little bit more towards brand because you really need to have both. You need to be building your brand and building your brand awareness because that brand equity is just so important.
Yeah.
It's what differentiates you from the competition. And, if you're not building those connections, which I think a lot of times tends to skew a little bit more brand, you want people to feel connected to your brand, then the next time they go purchase something, they're not going to know or care whether they're purchasing your product or your competitors. So I think that it's just so important to have that balance and to be mindful of both. I've seen some companies have brand and marketing work in separate silos. I worked at an international company before coming to Gravity, and there was a brand team. There was a consumer marketing team. There was, a B2B marketing team, and everything was so siloed and we didn't know what each other was doing. Our efforts weren't, consistent or comprehensive at all. And it really impacted that company. And to look at kind of where they were and where they are now, like there's a very noticeable difference. So it's just really important to make sure that all of your efforts align.
Yeah. And I hear that a lot about companies departments not working together. As an outsider to the corporate world, I'm always curious about that. Like, why aren't you all on the same side? Like, why is there such a problem?
Yeah.
That is so funny. Is there anything else that you want to have people know about branding that I haven't asked you?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the last thing I would say is, we work with a lot of companies of various sizes. And there are times that we've talked to either because they're clients or because we've been speaking to a group where we'll get kind of the solopreneurs and entrepreneurs and small businesses who think, gosh, I can't afford to, have a very well-known brand or to put a lot of energy or effort into kind of brand, raising brand awareness or focusing on marketing. And one of the things we're really passionate about is that it doesn't matter how big your business is or what industry you're in. Everyone deserves and benefits from having a recognizable brand and from having good marketing,
Mhm.
having honest marketing, creative marketing. Like that's something that anybody can do. Even if you have a small team, there are different, most communities have organizations that can come in and help small businesses. We have a great one here where we are, where small businesses can get some brand and marketing help and things like that. So I would just encourage everyone that regardless of what size you are, that it is important and that that's an area that, look for opportunities or for people that can help. LinkedIn is a great resource. There are so many people on there that share content, free content all the time to
Yeah.
help businesses. So I just hope everyone would see the value in it.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like an obvious thing, but like I said, it's when you're in it, I think it's hard to see those people who don't realize it. Well, this has been great, Lindsey. Where can people find you and find out more about you and what you do?
Yeah, you can find me at gravitygroup.com. I have a bio page on there and that'll connect right to my LinkedIn. So feel free to reach out on LinkedIn and connect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again for taking time today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Linda. Have a good day.